Hi guys, thank you so much for coming. This is Left the Valley Crew. It's always a pleasure to see you. Did you guys know that I found out the definition of cannibal? Apparently, it's someone who's fed up with people.
That's accurate. Yep. That
I-
is one way to interpret that. That's
We're doing something in view of our regular show, which we will do a bit later. But right now, what we're going to do, we're going to react to a gentleman. How do I word this? In Canada, we're proud of giving a lot of achievements to the world, but there are also some things we're not so proud of. Ted Cruz, for example, or Justin Bieber, and maybe even Nickelback. But there's also, unfortunately, Jordan Peterson. Jordan. What do we say about Jordan? Anybody have any thought about Jordan Peterson?
yeah, he's the stupid person, smart person.
Oh, I like that.
That's what I would say. Because it's funny because he'll say the most simple thing, but he takes 2 hours to do it, and I think that's what stupid people think smartness is. If they take 2 hours to say,
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure he's a smart man, but the way he words things, it's a big word salad that says nothing. Right?
Yeah.
That's the impression I get a lot from him. It's like, okay, you just spoke for 3 minutes here, but I still don't understand where you're going with any of this. There's no coherence to it. It's just like talking to Deepak Chopra with a PhD or something.
I've only watched a few of his videos, and I'm pretty sure you could play a logical fallacy drinking game and be drunk after just a few minutes.
Yeah, and he's so wordy that it's almost it makes it harder to pick him out, but it's just and it's funny because a lot of times people, if you get involved, get into conversations with this heavy fans, they'll just be like, oh, you just don't understand what he's saying. And it's no, I can show you. I'll show you exactly how I understand what he says, and I'll parse out every single piece of what he's saying, and then be like, so in the end, he was just saying X, and it was just oh, well, you missed all the other. No, man, that he just took a long way to just say a simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And in a way, Jordan Peterson is, I guess, an academic, and he's supposed to be essentially, for lack of a better term, a teacher. And
he was, yeah.
And the thing about being a teacher is, if you're going to teach something, explain something, it's your role as a teacher to explain it in a way that your student understands, right? Now, I'm not saying you dumb it down here. I'm saying, explain it in a way that is not cryptic, that could be, explainable. You don't. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's not talking to other academics when he's talking about his thing, and it's kind of weird to see him go up with such eloquent word salad that say nothing, and all of a sudden you're not exactly sure what you're dealing with here. Anyway,
Tried the wrong one.
Jordan Peterson let himself go.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
And there's Helen. Hi, Helen. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Poor Helen.
I think I fixed it, so we'll see. I'm suffering.
We're doing
today.
a poll here. $20 says video concerns are not fixed. Who's taking me home? Poor Helen. Oh, we love you, Helen.
I might have to switch to my phone.
Oh, that's okay. Well, anyway,
oh
Peterson here has this video, and Brent has got.
Why does it keep doing this?
Why do you keep putting that video on?
I don't know. It keeps on switching to the other video.
He said straightforwardly.
There we go.
That's the one. Okay, so this is essentially a video that was posted that says Jordan Peterson debunks atheism in 12 minutes, right? And the funny thing is even before that video starts, I would say it shouldn't take 12 minutes at all to debunk atheism. It should take about 12 seconds. All you have to do is provide evidence. That's all you have to do, right? So even before the 12 minutes here, let's go with 12 seconds. Provide evidence. It should take you 12 seconds to show that, and you should be done. But no, let's see what Jordan Peterson has to say for 12 minutes.
I mean, even if there was 12 seconds worth of evidence, it would take him 12 minutes just to say it. You know what I mean?
Maybe so, because it's Jordan Peterson. That's a good point.
Yeah.
The methodological substrate of the.
Oh, God.
Here we go.
If there's no God,
Oh,
so if there's no
should we,
higher value, let's
we do a bet first? Should we?
Oh.
I mean, you guys haven't seen that video, right?
No, I haven't
Okay.
seen it.
Are we taking bets? Is he going to cry at some point? Are we
No.
taking that bet? No, because it's not a live. It's not a live thing. Okay.
Oh,
Should we-
I'll say guilty. I watched the video earlier, so I've already had my trigger moments. But
Oh, okay.
Oh,
You watched the video.
like right off the bat, it's like Dostoevsky says straightforwardly, and he lies because
oh. No, the fuck he didn't. He didn't say that.
forwardly, straightforwardly.
You won't do
yeah,
it.
straightforwardly by meaning it's like we're completely rephrasing what he said. But anyway,
We'll do a
go
Jordan
on.
Peterson bingo, and we won't take a bet whether or not he cries in this video. So wait, let's go ahead.
I have a feeling he will. I'm like,
You have a
I'm
feeling?
like, I can make a soft bet. Like, I think he's gonna cry.
I'll bet that he
He's
says
very
methodological.
emotional about things.
I'll bet like $10 that he says methodological substrate at least 3 times.
Okay.
And he mentions Loki.
Oh,
That's that's a random one too. That's good.
all right. Let's do it.
All right, let's try this.
straightforwardly.
We should play Jordan Peterson.
If there's
bingo.
no God, so if there's no higher value, let's say, if there's no transcendent value, then you can do whatever you want. And that's the question that he's investigating. And you see, this is why I have such frustration, say, with people like Sam Harris, the sort of radical atheists, because they seem to think that once human beings abandon their grounding in the transcendent, that the plausible way forward is with a kind of purist rationality that automatically attributes to other people equivalent value. It's like, I just don't understand that.
Okay. So
What is
real
the
quick,
reason-
I just want to summarize what he's like wordily saying incorrectly, but he's saying that it's just the argument of that, like, if there is no God, God is the only thing that attributes meaning to anything.
That's
Right.
what I thought
And-
he was kind of saying.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not what Dostoevsky said, though.
What
The actual quote is, "I asked him, without God and immorality, all things are lawful. Then they can." Oh my goodness, my tongue tied on me. All things are lawful. Then they can do what they like. Like, it's been years since I've read Dostoevsky. I did read all his books, some of them twice, but it's a common theme that Dostoevsky has, where he doesn't really talk about the existence of God, rather how humanity interacts with the belief of God, the roles that religion plays. And, if you note in the original quote, when he says, without God and immortal life, he's not talking about God specifically. He's talking about a belief system which provides like a moral compass for people. And it's basically along the context of he's asking, do people need to have some sort of moral guideline to follow, or do they end up, or if they don't have that, do they just do whatever the heck that they want? No, he's not answering anything. He's just asking a question to get people thinking.
But it's such an easy answer too, right? Because let's say, for example, there's no God, there's no transcendent. Are we doing whatever we want? That's exactly what we've been doing throughout all of history of mankind. Exactly what we want to do. It's not like aliens have come to us and said, "Don't do this." The only time we're forced to do something we don't want is because our survival is at risk. But besides that, we've eliminated countless cultures. We've eliminated countless species without even batting an eye, and we're still doing it today. We're polluting the entire world. We're still doing whatever the fuck we want right now, and we've always done that as a species. There hasn't been some higher guiding principle, because if there was, this world would not be in the shithole it is right now, right? I mean, let's face it.
Exactly. Yeah, and the fact that, like, we don't I mean, everybody does exactly what they want, like what you're saying. We already do that, but self-preservation factors into what we want, right? And some people just don't want to, like, hurt other people and stuff. And for the people that do, well, we have methods to keep people from, to make people so that they don't want to do that, because there's consequences. It's like, I don't know, we have mechanisms in place to take care of things like that. And we don't need an all-powerful God source for those mechanisms to be in place.
No.
It's just we all want to
Well-
function as a society, and that's it. We're
Yeah,
done.
and one of my problems with the way that they've reworded what Dostoevsky said is that it infers that there's no other mechanisms to determine morality, that God's the only way to determine what's moral. And it's like, no, we have laws that we figured out that society has decided that we don't need to believe in a supernatural power to realize that it's an a-hole thing to go around killing, raping, and pillaging people. There's other cultures that don't believe in the Christian God, and they were able to figure that out on their own.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to figure out what's right and what's wrong.
It's like, I always say, real quick, I'm sorry, let me
Go ahead.
like I always say, like when it comes to like the like if you ever gone to like the gas station and seen like where it says like don't suck on the nozzle of the gas, of the gas pump, and you're like, who the fuck was that for? Who did that? Well, like somebody did that at some point. That's where morality comes from. That's it. Like somebody did something to somebody at some point, and we were like, don't do that, and that's it. We write that down, keep that, don't do X, and that's it. That's where
So far, Jordan Peterson has apparently debunked atheism in 12 minutes, and we've debunked Jordan Peterson in 35 seconds. That's pretty good. Excellent. All right, let's keep going.
Right. Let's see how long he can say the same thing while saying the same thing.
They believe that that's the rational pathway. What the hell is irrational about me getting exactly what I want from every one of you whenever I want it at every possible second?
Nobody says
Why is that irrational? And how possibly is that more irrational?
Because it's impossible, man. It's like believing things that are possible that are impossible is irrational. Sorry. This is driving. I'm going to get mad at
us cooperating so we can.
I can't do that, Jordan. I hate to tell
I
you.
understand that. I mean, it's as if the psychopathic tendency is irrational. There's nothing irrational about it. It's pure naked self-interest. How is that irrational? I don't understand that. Where's the pathway from rationality to an egalitarian virtue? Why the hell not every man for himself and the devil take the hindmost? It's a perfectly coherent philosophy. And it's actually one that you can institute in the world with a fair bit of material success if you want to do it. So I don't see, to me, I think that the universe that people like Dawkins and Harris inhabit is so intensely conditioned by mythological presuppositions that they take for granted the ethic that emerges out of that as if it's just a given, a rational given. And this, of course, precisely not Nietzsche's observation as well as Dostoevsky's. That's Nietzsche's observation. You don't get it. The ethic that you think is normative is a consequence of its nesting inside this tremendously lengthy history, much of which was expressed in mythological formulation. You wipe that out. You don't get to keep all the presuppositions and just assume that they're rationally accurate.
Yeah,
I
was waiting for somebody to stop me.
brains?
What's that? Go ahead.
I said, what did I say earlier about bullshit baffling brains?
Exactly.
Go ahead, Helen. You wanted to say something? Helen froze. Okay.
She wanted to say something. The gremlins in her computer.
Okay.
They got a different plan.
Is
This
she
is
back?
really good.
Are you back, Helen?
Oh, she's got like a delay.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you now.
Off and on.
Okay. I like, this is the thing, like he's equating being an atheist with being like a psychopath, like with mental illness, which is a false equivalency. And he's trying to, because that's what he's comparing it to. That we are driven by our impulses, that we'll cause harm because he gives us pleasure and all this type of stuff, which is not true. But it's one of the problems that people like Jordan Peterson have to make their worldview fit, is that they have to make the people that have an opposite way of thinking like evil or don't have a morality base and that sort of thing. And that's what I'm hearing when I hear him talk about this, because he's trying to equate this idea of atheists being the type of people that will just go on our impulses. He's not
I
thinking
agree.
about it and he says this, and yes, psychopathy can be rational because we know how to explain it. We know what's going. That's why people have studied it. Then do behavioral science is because we want to understand what went wrong to that person, so it can be explained and in a rational way. The behavior doesn't align with the moral society has.
Mm-hmm.
And there's psychopaths that don't kill people. They're CEOs. So
Yeah.
He hasn't really proved anything yet. It's just like a long ad hominem fallacy to demonize atheists, so that our position seems psychopathic.
Yeah, it's a straw man.
Yeah.
It's a huge straw man.
I also hate the way he's saying here that the transcendence and our ethics emanates from the past, which has been laced with a lot of mythology. It's true, it's been laced with a lot of mythology, but it's also been laced with a lot of history. It's been laced with a lot of experiences as well. We don't need mythology to give us our ethics. Somebody could be raised completely without religion all their life. They don't automatically turn to this horrible, evil thing because they don't have a mythology in their lives. Not at all. Most of our ethics essentially evolved from knowing and understanding our own nature. And it had nothing to do with mythology. Mythology was just trying to wait to explain something we couldn't explain. But we knew instinctively, as a social species, that killing each other, for example, is bad for ourselves because we're a social species. If we had evolved into a different type of species, a species that was much more solitary, the whole idea of killing each other would not be as much of an aberration as it is to our species right now, because we are a social species. We don't need mythology to teach us this. We understand this as soon as you're a child, because as a child, you need your parents to raise you. You can't just wander off on your own. But if we were a species that would have been able to do this, our mythology would be, one, extremely different, and our ethics would be extremely different too. So I don't understand why he puts this big thing. Well, if we didn't have mythology, we wouldn't be able to do this stuff. No, quite the opposite. Mythology was just our way to try to explain something that we didn't have the words or the proper language to explain, an innate behavior within ourselves.
And think about this, like, because he's also misunderstanding the entire concept, it seems, of rationality and its relation to morality and ethics, right? Because like rationality doesn't technically, like, rationality just means like that you believe things that are true. You believe in, like, your understanding of reality is as close to actual reality as you can get within reason, right? And so what's crazy though is he's saying like it's actually he's doing this weird thing where he's saying that it's rational to be super selfish, which that's just not true. That's axiomatically, if you want to say axiomatically untrue, that is but right. the fact that he's like saying that that it's rational to hurt other people, but like think about what's irrational. It's irrational to say that some invisible thing is dictating what I should or should not do. That is irrational, and that leads to harm much more often than somebody who is completely rational, even if they are selfish, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are selfish, that means you value your self-preservation, which means that you don't want to hurt people, because then those people will go tell other people, and then those people will come and restrain you. Just understanding that keeps you from doing the things that he's saying that we all should just be doing if there's no God, right? And it's like, but rationality is like, it doesn't really have anything necessarily to do with ethics in this sense.
When Jordan says it's rational to be selfish, what he actually means, what he actually should say is, to be selfish in a capitalistic system is rewarded. That's what he actually needs to say. It's not rational to be selfish. It's actually rewarded in our economic system at this point. But it's not a question of rationality at all. It's just, in the world that we currently live, our economic system we live in, it's actually rewarded to be selfish, unfortunately. Which I think this is a whole new can of worms I don't want to open. But eventually, I think we're going to have to come to understanding between our human nature, our social species of a human nature, and our economic system is going to come to a clash at some point, because we can only go so far. But that, like I said, this whole new can of worms I don't want to open. Let's move on.
All right, here we go.
Let's hear more gobbling up.
Start with an initial proposition. Well, the proposition that underlies Western culture is that there's a transcendent morality. Now, you could say that's a transcendent morality instantiated in the figure of God. That's fine. You could even call that a personification of the morality. If you want to, if you don't want to move into a metaphysical space, I'm not arguing for the existence of God. I'm arguing that the ethic that drives our culture is predicated on the idea of God, and that you can't just take that idea away and expect the thing to remain intact midair without any foundational support. I think that fundamentalists and atheistic scientists have the same problem. The fundamentalists, so we could say the Christian fundamentalists in the US, make the proposition that biblical stories
Can we
are
pause for a
literal
second and go back for a sec?
representations of the truth.
Yeah, what's up?
Because something that really bugs me is how he's saying how like he more or less has a fancy way of saying morality comes from God.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's no consistency in the moral, like in the morality of Christianity. It changes with every generation, whether it be everything from like extremes of like women's rights or slavery to how we treat people who are different, right down to like 60 years ago, like rock and roll was the devil's music. Now every church has a rock band.
Yeah.
It's like what they deem as moral just changes with however pop culture decides is immoral.
See, that's interesting because I took it as he was basically saying that the transcendence and the image of God. He said, "I'm not debating whether or not the existence." I kind of thought of using the word God as essentially a placemat. As we don't really have a word to explain this so-called transcendence. So we call it God, and he was not necessarily debating whether or not there was a physical being that represented that, but just as a metaphor. So I thought he had something interesting going on there for half a second.
Yeah.
For half a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for someone to kick in because I felt like I was hogging the
True,
camera.
depending on what you mean by literal.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Gotta move.
this is where you get to true Jordan Peterson here.
Right? It's all tangled. All right, here we go.
But what they
Oh,
mean
we're
by
gonna
literal, or what
describe
they
literal
attempt to
now.
make literal mean,
What's up? Okay.
same
it's
category
delayed.
as scientific facts. You have that there are different ways of approaching it, and
Uh-oh.
Hold on, let me pause.
The video was buffering.
Let me catch up for a second. Sometimes it.
So he's basically,
Oh,
so he's
what's up?
saying essentially that a literal, the fundamentalists, the Christians are saying literal as in scientific fact. Yeah, it's exactly what they're saying. It's exactly what the Christian fundamentalists are saying when they're saying the ark went and the whole world flooded. They actually mean it literally. There's no cute way to interpret literal here. It actually means exactly that. It means that they actually think this event happened as described in the book. There's no way to interpret literal here. They actually mean literal as in it happened this way.
And in spite of all the evidence that shows like a worldwide flood is virtually impossible because there's not enough water on the planet to accommodate it, for one.
Yeah.
But and the only way for it to be possible is if you look at the old Hebrew cosmological model, where outside the firmament is all these waters of the abyss, whatever, and that's where all the water for the flood came from and went back out to. If you look at the scriptures carefully, it's you start to realize that oh, wait a second, this story is completely mythological. It's based on mythological cosmology that we've proven is wrong like hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. But people will choose like the fundamentalists, will use observation bias or whatever to choose parts of history, like, oh, we found fish bones on a mountain. Noah's flood is real.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll use the cherry pick science to try to prove this mythology that just doesn't make really sense to anybody that wants to try to rationalize the argument. But you know,
I mean, of all the Bible stories, the story of the Great Flood is by far the one you can drive a freaking semi through all the holes in that story. It's absolutely incredible. Of all the Bible stories, that's the one that's so easily debunked. It's not even funny. So,
Yeah. I mean, the talking donkey's pretty solid. That one's a little bit harder.
well,
to...
you saw one in Trek, so there's two examples of talking donkeys. Yeah. Every time I say donkey, now I just imagine Eddie Murphy's voice as soon as that donkey looks at me. What about that? Coffee is like the best thing in the world.
We're making waffles.
Your definition of truth is actually something like a tool rather than an ontological statement about the reality of the world. And so the fundamentalists basically make the proposition that the idea that God created the world in 6 days 5,000 years ago is literally true. And they get the 5,000 year estimate, by the way, by going through the genealogies in the Old Testament and adding up the hypothetical ages and figuring out, how long before Moses, Adam lived. And some bishop did that back in I think it was in the mid 1800s. I might be wrong about that, but it was somewhere back about that time. And
which, what a waste of time. Holy shit.
As canonical fact ever since.
Well,
and then the scientists say,
that did it,
well, yeah, those are empirical truths. They're just wrong. See, and that's the only difference there is between the fundamentalists and the atheist scientists. The fundamentalists say,
oh my god, no, they're saying that things that are impossible happen.
Oh, well,
Science says we demonstrate how things are.
gosh.
And saying it's your truth doesn't make it any more true. It's just not right. It's wrong. Right?
It's like, it's just a type of claims. As long as they claim as it's true, then it's, that's all the same. It's all the same. Really. What the fuck?
This is the what was her name that used to be in the Trump administration? Alternative facts.
Well, what I think is funny is scientists don't need. Oh, go ahead, Helen. Oh.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I like the fact that he's using fundamental scientific truths, which we do have true science, and mixing it in with, like, what religion thinks true is, and trying to equate it to actually being a science, which is not. So I just find that amusing that he's trying to equate the two and like I said, he speaks a bunch of gobbledygook and makes connections that aren't there.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out that, like, scientists don't need to be fundamentalists because they have the scientific method. And the scientific method takes everybody's hypothesis, test it, retest it, try to prove each other wrong. And when they finally come to a conclusion where they can't deny what the objective truth is, then then that's the final claim that science sticks with. Meanwhile, you'll have religious fundamentalists. They'll choose a subjective truth, and they will fight tooth and nail to try to claim that that's true no matter what.
Yeah, and they can't prove it wrong either. There's no way for them to prove themselves wrong because they live in a world of actual magic.
That's why we don't have scientific denominations.
Yeah, but he's comparing apples and oranges. It's like he's saying that objective truths are the same as subjective truths, and that's just not true. One can be proven, and the other one is just what you feel in your gut. But either way, carry on.
There we go.
Those are fundamental scientific truths, and they're right. And the scientists say, well, they're scientific truths. They just happen to be wrong. Well,
what?
I think that's a stupid argument, personally. I mean, for a bunch of reasons. One is
just refute his own argument.
People who wrote the ancient stories that we have access to
were
in no way, shape, or form scientists.
Thank you.
Modern people tend to think that you think like a scientist, and people have always thought that way. First of all, you do not think like a scientist. Even scientists hardly even think like scientists. But if you're not scientifically trained, you don't think like a scientist at all. So one of the things, for example, that characterizes your thinking is confirmation bias. And so if you have a theory, what you do is wander around in the world.
Let me summarize what he was trying to say there, because that's the most confusing fucking way to say that shit. What he's basically saying is all our brains make mistakes all the time, right? Science is supposed to get around that by demonstrating things and testing and having other people with other biases, like making sure that they test and we all get the same results no matter what we believe. no matter, whether God exists or, whether Allah is God, or any of that stuff. Facts are facts, regardless of anybody's belief system. That's the confirmation bias. But he's saying that scientists don't think like scientists. That's a fucking stupid way to say that. Because scientists do train themselves to think like scientists, but because now they're fucking scientists, man.
Well, we do have doctors and scientists that don't think like scientists, but that's why we have the scientific method to weed those problems out.
Exactly.
Peer review.
Every scientist out there will also have a normal bias. Everybody has a normal bias, but this is why you have the scientific method to be intellectually honest about your own beliefs at some point. And when you use the method, you realize, God damn, I'm wrong about this. You have to be intellectually honest and accept it, and then change your point of view.
Yeah.
And let's move on because we're like 15 minutes left, and we're not even through the freaking video.
Looking for reasons why it's true.
We'll summarize. Let's watch the rest.
Does exactly the opposite of that in the little tiny narrow domain where he or she is actually capable of being a scientist. And what they have is a theory and look for a way to prove it wrong. But believe me, you don't run around doing that. I mean, you can train yourself, so now and then you can do that. You can learn to listen to people, for example, on the off chance that you might be wrong. But that is by no means a natural way of thinking. The fundamental philosophical axioms of the scientific method weren't developed until Descartes and Bacon, and you can argue about when science emerged, but it certainly emerged in its articulated form within the last 1,000 years. I think you could say even more specifically that it emerged in the last 500 years. Now, you might argue with that and say, well, what about the Greeks and other people who were fairly technologically sophisticated or who invented geometry or that kind of thing? But bare precursors to the idea of empirical observation. Aristotle, for example, when he was writing down his knowledge of the world, it never occurred to him to actually go out in the world and look at it to see if what he assumed about it was true. And it certainly never occurred to Aristotle to get the same thing.
Can we pause this?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Aristotle is the guy who proved that the Earth was round, that it was an actual globe. He wasn't the first person to come up with this. Archimedes.
Galileo was the.
It wasn't Galileo. It was
Galileo was the first one to say it, but he was killed as a martyr.
It was Aristotle. Pythagoras was the person that originally came up with the idea of the Earth being a globe, but it was Aristotle that came around afterwards that devised an experiment of measuring the Earth's shadow on the equinox to use reverse geometry to measure the distance around the globe.
Oh, I thought it was somebody else.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Aristotle. It wasn't Pythagoras either. It was Jesus Christ.
Well, there was after he came along, there was Plato, Archimedes, and
Eratosthenes is the one who did that.
Eratosthenes came after what? Maybe I remember it wrong, but what I read was Aristotle, Plato, Archimedes. Eratosthenes, if I can say that right.
Eratosthenes is the one who did the shadow experiment between Alexandria and I think it was Athens. That did that shadow experiment with the stick. He's the one who actually did the experiment. I mean, Aristotle might have started out with philosophizing that the Earth was round or a globe like that, but Eratosthenes is the one who actually did the trick.
I think you're right, because when I was like Googling this the other day, I remembered it not being Aristotle, but that's what I was reading, so I read some bad information.
What you might not know, there was another little known Greek philosopher at the time. His name was Mediocrities, and his answer was meh, good enough.
This one's I just asked Google and it says like Ferdinand Magellan and Juan Sebastian.
That's
right though, right?
Yeah, we're using.
Anyway,
we're going ancient Greek times, but oh, sorry. Go ahead, Helen. Oh,
I was just going to say, one that really bothers me. He was attacking scientific method, but the thing is, though, he's a psychologist. It's a social science, and you have to learn how to do research as part of your degree when you're a psychologist, which uses the scientific method. So he's being completely hypocritical at this time.
Oh yeah. Well, accusing other people of confirmation bias while he's doing that exact same thing is pretty hypocritical. But the whole reason why I just to switch back a little bit, the whole reason why I went into a bit of a history tangent there is we didn't have just one person with an idea. We had a variety of philosophers or scientists in the Greek world that were all doing their own experiments to check the idea. Now, the scientific method itself didn't come about till about 300 or 400 years ago, but variations of it that led up to that final process. I lost my freaking train of thought again. But there was a long standing of science leading up to that point that people like Bacon and stuff relied on to realize that, oh, okay, you know what? Let's just cut out all the philosophical crap out of science and base everything on what we can prove. And to do that, we have to have information, observations, and experiments to determine what's true. Yeah. And and that's why it reaches an objective truth. But Jordan just keeps on trying to compare objective truths to like subjective truths and trying to make them seem like the same thing when they're not. Yeah. But either way, I'm eating up time.
So we'll let the end of it. We'll just keep it play, and then we'll do a little conversation right after.
Yeah, sure.
Just real quick.
Write down exactly how they went about
the
records, and then to some degree, but so that.
Hold on, let me rewind.
Man, he's making less sense than I am.
Here you go. I'll try it again.
But there's people don't do it. If you know anything about the history of ideas, it's not plausible to posit that stories about the nature of reality that existed before 500 years ago were scientific in any but the most cursory of ways. So why we have that argument continually is somewhat beyond me. Part of the reason is, though, that everyone, fundamentalists included, really believe in scientific facts, even though they hate it. They'll use computers, they'll fly. Computers wouldn't work unless quantum mechanics were correct. The fact that you use a high-tech device indicates through your action that you actually accept the theories upon which it's predicated, right? Same as flying, same as anything you do in a complex technological society. You're stuck with it. You're reading by the lights. Do they work? Yeah, they work. Well, so it's really hard for people who are trying to hold on to a way of looking at the world that appears to contradict the scientific claims when everything they do is predicated on their acceptance of the validity of the scientific claims.
That's absolutely right.
It's really problematic for people, and it's problematic in a real way, I think, because one of the problems with the scientific viewpoint is it doesn't tell you anything about what you should do with your life.
Yeah,
it doesn't solve the problem of value at all. In fact, it might make it more difficult because one of the fundamental scientific claims, roughly speaking, is that every
unless you do like Sam Harris,
utility,
the moral landscape,
at least from a scientific perspective, right? There's no hierarchy of facts. It's not exactly true, because you can think of one theory as more true than another, but that boils down to saying that it's more useful than another. So I don't think that that's a really good exception. Okay, so fine.
Jesus. Prove it. Just give
the
us the fucking proof, man.
On one end, and you got the religious fundamentalists on the other, and what they both agree on, whether they like it or not, is that there's so much power in the scientific method that it's difficult to dispute the validity of scientific facts. And they seem to exist in contradiction to the older, archaic stories if you also accept them as fact-based accounts. So what do we do about that? Well, if you're on the scientific atheist end of things, you say, well, those old stories are just superstitious science, second-rate, barbaric, archaic forms of science. You just dispense with them. They're nothing but trouble. And if you're on the fundamentalist side, you say, well, we'll try to shoehorn science into this framework, and really that doesn't work very well. It doesn't work very well with the claims of evolution, for example. In fact, it works very badly. Yeah, and that's a problem, because evolutionary theory is like, it's a killer theory. And it's really, really hard. And like, it's not a complete theory, and there's lots of things we don't know about evolution, but
therefore God.
Trying to hand wave that away, that's not going to work without dispensing with most of biology.
He's right. He's right on that.
So that's a big problem. So Here's another way of thinking about it. You don't just need one way of looking at the world. Maybe you need two ways of looking at the world, and I'm not exactly sure how they should be related to one another, like
One
which should take
philosophical,
precedence
one scientific.
under which circumstance. But one problem is, what's the world made of? You know, what's the world conceptualized as an objective place made of? Another is, how should you conduct yourself while you're alive? And there's no reason to assume that those questions can be answered using the same approach. Physics has its methods, and chemistry has its methods, and biology has its methods. So a method for obtaining the truth can be bound to a domain. So why would we necessarily assume that you could use the same set of tools to represent the world as a place of objects and to represent it as a place in which a biological creature would act? I'm suggesting that we don't view it that way, that we have two different viewpoints. Maybe they can be brought together, although it's not obvious how, but that it's not a tenable solution to get rid of one in favor of the other. And I think the reason for that is that you need to know how to conduct yourself in the world. You have to have a value system. You can't even look at the damn world without a value system. It's not possible. Your emotional health is dependent on a value system. The way you interact with other people is dependent on a value system. There's
That's
no
all based
getting
on a
away from
fallacy.
it. And you say, well, there's
It's
no
all based on the
justification for any
fallacy
value
that
system from a scientific
They have a value
perspective.
system and we
You
don't.
draw that conclusion that
It's all
no
based on
value
that.
system is valid. Where the hell
Anybody
does that
not
leave you?
Christian
There's no
doesn't have a value
down.
system.
There's no up. There's no rationale for moving in any direction. There's
Okay.
not even really any rationale for living. And
All
so
we go.
people say things.
Okay, good. We're almost done. So we
I
can...
think we pretty much got the gist of it. A couple of things that I want to add to this. No atheist has ever said that when fundamentalist Christians look at their ancient so-called observations of events, that it's superstitious science. I have never heard that term. Oh, they're just using superstitious science? That doesn't exist. I don't know what the hell you just made up there for. Nobody's ever said, "Oh yeah, these fundamental Christians, they're just doing superstitious science." No, that's not a thing. That doesn't exist.
No, they're doing mythology. Like,
Like
I don't understand why he says, why do we, he says biology's got a way and chemistry's got a way. Why do we need two ways to look at the world? Why is he proposing that we need two different ways to look at the world? No, this is one of those rare instances where it's either black or white. It's either true or it's not. There's no way to, we have the scientific truth, but then we have a philosophical truth that needs to be happening in our mind for us to move forward as a species. No, we don't need this. There's something is either true or it's not when it comes to the domain of truth. It's one of the rare things that's actually black and white.
And he doesn't view morality as an amorphous thing, because we do change our moral systems. Society changes as we become more educated, when we actually study things that and understand the scientific model, because that's how we find out about ourselves in the world, Jordan. So this equivalency that somehow facts are superstitious is very confusing to me, and because those two words should not be together.
No,
And
the fact that he's also saying that somehow these superstitious facts, like he calls them, somehow have a same, a different but same inherent value as a scientific fact is ridiculous. Just because you have a superstitious fact in your head doesn't make it true, and it's not something that is necessarily needed for us to proceed as a species into this world. It's just not.
The only thing I can think of that could be like sort of what he's trying to say, because you're right that truth, like facts are facts, right? But the thing is, if you have we can't ever we can get as close to truth as we possibly can, but we're never going to be like 100% truth, right? So if you have people that are like, hey, I think this is true, and then you have people that go, no, this is true, the back and forth and the kind of fighting allows us to go, hey, let's demonstrate it, let's prove it. If we hadn't had that back and forth, then we wouldn't be having somebody or we wouldn't have come up with the fact that we have to prove things, and those are the idiots we have to convince, which sucks because they don't seem to be convinced by much.
My take is
Also, too, is
whether it's
he
Christian.
equating? I just have a quick question.
Go
Like,
ahead.
is he equating people in the past as there was no atheists 500 years ago? Because there were.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
That's a good point.
does he have this worldview past has a spiritual, only viewed the world through a spiritual lens? Because there have been atheists since the Greeks, and we did civilization, because when philosophy and they had these discussions, that's a few atheists emerged from that because of the questions people were asking themselves. So I don't know. I think he thinks that all the people came before us, before we entered the scientific age, were believed on the planet.
Yeah, fundamentalists will follow this narrative that fundamentalists will follow this narrative
sorry,
that we're
Troy.
in a spiritual war, and it's a war against God. And all he's doing right now is inserting atheists, scientists, anybody that's doubting God as being on the opposite side, battling the forces of good. He's not saying that directly, but that's the narrative that he's feeding into. That the world is in a supernatural in a supernatural war right now. Which, if you talk to a lot of fundamentalists, they will believe that.
Yeah.
What I kind of want to mention, though, is whether it's Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, or ancient Greek or Norse mythology, it's all just mythology. And mythology is able to teach like philosophical truths, moral truths, ethical truths, but they're all subjective from the time and era that they were created.
Yes.
So it's like a lot of the morals that we learn, that we hear in the Bible, for example, they make no sense to us right now.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, that's what pop culture demanded. That's what was normal then.
Yeah.
And it's. Oh, sorry, you say something, Kevin?
Yeah, I just want to quick. I'm looking at we're running against the clock here. I just want to close in a little thought that, a thought experiment that we could all do, because they always talk about objective and subjective when it comes to morality. The morality can be objective, but not on a universal scale. It's objective on a species level. It's objective to us as a species because we're a social species. If our species was a different species, if we were like, let's say, for example, the predator species of the movies, that they killed Arnold Schwarzenegger and all that stuff, we would have a very different set of morality, because they're a different set of species. There are species that seem to much more autonomous, much less social. The fact that we're monkeys that depend on each other for survival formed our set of philosophy, our set of ethics, and our reasons and our morality. If we were a very different species that was much more independent, from the get-go, you didn't have to wait several years to raise a child. The child could just get up and walk away as soon as they were born. We would have a very different set of philosophy, a different set of morals. So philosophy and morality is subjective to our species, not to the individual. It's objective to all of us as a group, but it's subjective in the greater scheme of things. So I'm pretty sure if there was a species of, dolphins became intelligent all of a sudden, and they were, well, they are intelligent, but they would have a civilization. They would have a different set of morality as well. And I think Jordan Peterson is really shooting himself in the foot when he says, that philosophy and morality there's an objective morality throughout the universe. I don't think that there is such a thing. I don't think there is such a thing at all.
And I'd honestly even disagree with you. I don't think there is subjective. I mean, I think all morality is subjective, as far as like humanity goes, even on an individual level. I mean, me and Robert get into this all the time because he's like, there's got to be a best way. If there has to be a best way, then there has to be an objective morality. But the only way I could really see it, though, is if, let's say, non-subjective evaluation of consequences of actions with respect to a specific goal, the goal being the best well-being for everybody. But that's when you've decided on a goal. If people don't agree on a goal, which we don't, then it's always subjective no matter what. And so pragmatically, I believe it's subjective.
That's what bugs me is he tries to prove his point by saying that science sucks because science isn't philosophy. And in my mind, it's the same thing as saying this car sucks because it's not a boat. Like it's a science isn't meant to determine ethics or whatever. It's supposed to determine how our world works and how we can alter our environment to make the world better for us. It's philosophy, ethics, and all that stuff that we're constantly working on. That's what we should be like. If we want to be better people, then science isn't going to do that. But learning more about our humanity will. And he tries to make this argument that they hold the patent, that only Christians know what morality is. Like people from other countries or other cultures, or if an atheist, we have no idea what morality is, but they do. Meanwhile, they can't prove it. Like you look at the morality of the world of when Christianity had a theocracy and controlled everything. It's some of the most brutal times throughout history. So where's this morality that he keeps on saying that they have a patent to, because they don't employ it, and when they had the opportunity, they didn't employ it.
That's right.
So
anyway, I'm going to cut you off here because we're past our time here. So anyway, thank you so much for being with us today, guys. I really appreciate that, and keep philosophizing, I guess.
Yeah. But he didn't prove God. That was the point. He didn't prove.
I wanted to see him
He said he
try.
he said he wasn't even trying to prove God. So I mean, I would leave that out of your proof of God thing. Anyway.
Thank you so much.
He didn't cry or mention Loki.
You're